I couldn't get out of the cycle because I didn't know what correct human nutrition was, despite the fact that I was studying it. So yeah, so it's kind of ironic, really, but I wanted to do the right thing. So, I'd use all my willpower to do the so-called right thing, cut calories right back, do low fat, feel terrible. And then at some point, your body just says, you can't do this. This is not like sustainable. And so then you flip back. The thing with keto is it helps so many different things. Like, it's not just you do keto for weight loss or you do keto because you've got epilepsy. Like, for me, it has significantly reduced pain, improved sleep, improved energy, much easier weight loss than any other so-called diet. Allergies have gone away. I used to get terrible hay fever, just all sorts of things, joint aches and pains, like everything has improved. And really sticking to keto, because keto for me, the actual ketones themselves are therapeutic. It's not just that I'm not eating the carbs. It's actually the ketones are anti-inflammatory. They help to dampen an overactive nervous system, which is basically what fibro is. And also they increase calming neurotransmitters like GABA as well, which can help with mood, with sleep, with pain, all those things. So I always say ketones for me are therapeutic in the same way they are for someone with epilepsy. So that's how I see it. It's very medicinal for me. So if someone offers me a piece of cake, I just say, I'm sorry, that will kick me out of ketosis, and that's like taking my medicine away. The main thing is about eating real whole foods. That's my main thing with anybody, no matter what the situation is. That's the underlying thing that, it underpins nutrition, is eat real whole foods and alter the carbohydrate amount depending on your metabolic health, your goals, what you want to achieve and how it affects you. That's kind of the summary, I guess, of healthy eating.
Hello, everyone. This is Nayiri from Low Carbon Fasting. Today's guest was a psychology major, and after graduating, she went on and studied health psychology and nutrition. I hope I'm correct in that. So she's known as Keto by Design on Instagram. She's specialized in the ketogenic diet. Carla Veith-Carter, is that how you say your surname, Carla? Welcome to Low Carbon Fasting.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Carla, so you're from, which part of Australia are you from?
I'm in Melbourne, down the bottom.
You're in Melbourne. Okay, so Carla, what brought you into the keto or low carb space? Because when you trained in nutrition, I'm pretty sure you didn't cover ketogenic diets.
No, I certainly did not. In fact, when I was studying nutrition, I was a vegetarian, which, as you probably know, it's very hard to do low carb being a vegetarian, because all of the, pulses and, everything vegetarian, pretty much apart from eggs and dairy. And I was intolerant to dairy, so it was really only eggs. So I was super low in protein. And yeah, around that time I had polycystic ovaries as well, which I only resolved when I started eating more protein in the morning. I was just eating fruit and thinking I was being healthy. And somebody said to me, you actually need to eat protein in the morning, and it changed everything. That was just one meal. So the power of that dietary change, happened a long time ago, but I still didn't put the pieces together in terms of low carb at that point. So I was very set on my vegetarian ways. But I did, at that point, I was sugar-free. So I was aware, it's kind of a spectrum really, of carbs. You've kind of got sugar at one end, and then you've got refined carbs, and then you've got whole carbs, and then, you've got trying to reduce all carbs. So I started a long time ago with the sugar-free. And then, I started researching more and realizing, it's not just sugar that says sugar, it's, all of the honey and maple syrup and dates and, coconut sugar and all that stuff. And so I gradually removed all of that. And then the more you research sugar, the more you kind of come across low carb, because they obviously overlap. So I had then, my eyes were open to a lot more of the low carb stuff. And then, of course, as you go down the low carb rabbit hole, you end up finding, information about the ketogenic diet. So it was a very kind of organic process for me over a very long period of time. It wasn't just like I went to uni, studied it and knew about it. It was my own learning journey, and I had my own health issues along the way as well. I've got fibromyalgia, and also I've lost 30 kilos on low carb and keto. So, I struggled with weight my whole life. I was a chronic yo-yo dieter. Even though I was learning at university how dangerous that was, I couldn't get out of the cycle because I didn't know what correct human nutrition was, despite the fact that I was studying it. So yeah, so it's kind of ironic, really, but I wanted to do the right thing. So, I'd use all my willpower to do the so-called right thing, cut calories right back, do low fat, feel terrible. And then at some point, your body just says, you can't do this. This is not like sustainable. And so then you flip back. So I did that a lot. And yeah, it was only when I found low carb that I found freedom, really, from food obsession. Like it just, everything was always about food, about losing weight, and now it's about being healthy and nourishing myself. And, it's a completely different focus, I think, that low carb's given me as well. And eating meat again, like my family was so shocked after half my life of being a vegetarian. Suddenly, I'm, just absolutely desperate for meat because my body's screaming out for it, and so much happier and healthier now that I've included meat back in my diet. So yeah, so that's kind of my story, I guess, of how I got to being keto.
Well, I didn't realize we had the vegetarianism in common, between the two of us, because I was also vegetarian for 30 years until I started studying and training in nutrition. And then I realized, oh my goodness, I'm basically missing out on every essential nutrient that I desperately, my body was craving those nutrients.
Me too.
I had no idea. And as a type 1 diabetic, I was eating not only pasta and rice, but also my only protein choices, of course, were lentils and chickpeas, believing that, I was nourishing my body.
I know it. And also, there's so much cognitive dissonance that goes on. Like I remember studying nutrition, learning about the nutrients you could get from meat, and almost like putting it in a little bubble and putting it to the side as if somehow that didn't apply to me. Like, I don't know how I did it, but I just convinced myself, it's better for the animals. I was very animal focused as well. It was a real ethical thing for me. But also I did convince myself it was healthy. And, maybe there are some very rare people who can be healthy vegetarians, but I think most people do better eating meat. And I certainly found that for myself anyway.
I think what saved me was the fact that I was eating dairy, a lot of dairy, which I still do and I love, and it agrees with me. So and eggs, not that I disliked eggs, but I didn't even think that they were important because of course I was
eggs are
lentils.
amazing.
I was eating lentils. Why would you eat eggs?
Yeah. Well, do you know the funny thing about dairy is that I used to be incredibly intolerant to dairy. Like my reaction, if I had something with cream in it, I'd be rolling around in agony. Like my guts just couldn't cope. I would get eczema. I couldn't breathe properly, like fully, really, really bad reaction. After I went keto, I can now have dairy. It's amazing. Like it must, going keto has obviously somehow changed my gut or something in the immune system, whatever it is. Like the thing with keto is it helps so many different things. Like it's not just you do keto for weight loss or you do keto because you've got epilepsy. Like for me, it has significantly reduced pain, improved sleep, improved energy, much easier weight loss than any other so-called diet. Allergies have gone away. I used to get terrible hay fever, just all sorts of things, joint aches and pains, like everything has improved, like to the point that it has literally revolutionized my life from being quite disabled with fibromyalgia to quite functioning. I mean, I still have to be careful and I still have to do all the things that I know keep me where I am in my healthy space. But when I do that, and keto being the main part of that, my life is unrecognizable from what it was before.
Carla, let's talk more about the fibromyalgia for anyone who's not familiar with it. Of course, it's chronic fatigue, right?
So fibromyalgia is it's a chronic pain condition that does have chronic fatigue as one of the major factors that most people have with it. But the symptoms are very, very wide and varied. There's all sorts of things that I didn't even know were fibromyalgia until I started researching it. So things like sensitivities to smells and restless legs and just all sorts of random stuff, but the main core of it is pain, and like chronic pain, and often moving pain. So it's not just always in the same place. It can move. And yes, the chronic fatigue, and lots of mood issues, sleep issues. They're kind of probably the four pillars. But as I say, so many random little things that you just think is just a quirky thing that you've got. And then you look it up and you go, oh my goodness, there's other people, experiencing that too. So it's not very well understood. And I think up until quite recently, people have almost thought it's just in people's heads. But there is a lot more research coming out now about the actual physiological parts of it. And people with fibromyalgia do actually respond to pain differently to people without it. So it's almost like an overactive nervous system where I could do something really small that for most people would be nothing, and my body thinks I've just done something really horrific, and it needs to tell me that it's painful because it wants me to stop moving or whatever it is, or my whole back might seize up, or my muscles might tighten because my body's protecting me, or it thinks it's protecting me, but it's overreacting. So you feel pain for something that most people would not experience pain. So yeah, it's very varied. Everyone's experience is very varied. But for me, definitely the pain and the lack of energy, and I had very heavy legs. So like walking, I honestly felt like I had lead in my legs. So moving, just walking, like my husband would say, let's just walk around the block. And I would say, oh, you may as well have asked me to climb Mount Everest. Like I just can't do it. So the best thing for me when I started keto, I suddenly had this energy, and I actually wanted to exercise. Like I had all this energy that I hadn't had for so long, and I was wanting to get out and move and do things. And then I had to learn how to be very careful, because when you've got fibromyalgia, your body's very sensitive. So you get all gung-ho and excited that you've got some energy, and suddenly go to the gym. Your body is just completely thrown because it's not used to doing anything. And then, then I would hurt myself, and then I'd send myself backwards. And I had a bit of a vicious cycle for a while before I really learnt my body, what it can tolerate, how slowly I have to go. And it's a very common thing with fibromyalgia to be super frustrated, because on your good days, you want to do more, but you actually have to moderate because your body's not capable. So it's a big learning curve about yourself and about what works for you. And yeah, it's complicated.
Well, that's quite informative, and I don't think I've ever covered fibromyalgia on this channel. So I appreciate all that information. Two questions come to mind. Is it an autoimmune condition,
No.
and is it inflammatory condition? A bit like lupus, maybe.
Yeah, so look, it really isn't well understood. It's not autoimmune, but definitely inflammation plays a role. But I think it's really a nervous system condition. It's very much about the nerves responding to things in ways that it's overreacting, essentially. But it really needs a lot more research. It's really not well understood. But certainly if I do things in my life that are anti-inflammatory, like certain supplements or whatever it is, it definitely helps. So there's certainly an inflammatory role, but whether or not that's the actual cause or more of an effect, I think it's probably more of an effect of everything else that's going on. Yeah, but as I say, there really needs to be a lot more research into it. And I think there is gradually, they're doing MRIs and things and finding physiological differences now. So, it's certainly not all in your head. And there's actually research that shows that people who get a diagnosis actually improve because it's taken seriously. It's like an actual condition. They don't feel like they're just going mad, like I used to go to the osteo every week. And every time I'd go and I'd say, oh, you know, my neck's sore today. And then the next time I'd go and say, oh, my shoulders are sore today. And then I'd go back and say, oh, my back's sore today. Like, it was this constantly moving thing. And I think that osteo thought I was, you know, just a bit of a hypochondriac, to be honest. And then when I actually finally got the diagnosis, it was like, it was amazing to actually have a name for it, you know, even though there's not a lot that, you know, that they could tell me. It just felt good to have something concrete that I could do some research, because the actual person who diagnosed me gave me no hope, nothing really. Like, it was, you were asking before about the actual how I got diagnosed. So it was through a neurologist. I was referred by my GP, and they did all these tests and things, mostly like a lot of questions and a lot of prodding and poking, because there's actually specific points on the body that are sensitive in people with fibromyalgia. So he kind of was prodding around my body, and every time I said, ouch, you know, he'd be like, okay, that's one of the points, you know. So, but the first time that I saw him, as I was walking out the door, literally, he said, I could diagnose you with fibromyalgia, but what's the point? As I'm walking out the door. So I left going, whoa, I don't even know what fibromyalgia is. What on earth's going on? And of course, nothing got better. So the GP sent me back. So he prodded and poked and asked more questions and all the rest of it. And then he said, okay, well, I'll diagnose you, but really, I can't help you. Like, it's just a label. I said, surely there's something. What can I do? He said, oh, well, some studies show exercise helps. You know, but given that I had no energy, like, that wasn't very helpful. And oh, there's a drug that might help, Lyrica. And I said, well, I'm not a big fan of medication, so I will only take something if you can tell me it's going to like revolutionize my life, because I'm not going to just take something just for the sake of it. And he said, oh no, I wouldn't bother. So like, I was left with nothing. So you know, I didn't know who to turn to or what to do, but at least I had something concrete that I could look into. So, and realize I wasn't alone. And then, you know, over time, I've sort of created what I consider a puzzle to my health, you know, with all the different pieces. And keto is definitely the main one. And intermittent fasting as well. But also things like, you know, stretching and exercise and supplements. And I did eventually find a doctor who suggested a medication that does actually work, which is called NDEP. It works for me anyway. And I take half the lowest dose. It is such a tiny dose that I don't feel too bad about taking it, especially given that it does actually make a pretty significant difference. And so, yeah, so I've got, you know, I do Pilates, and I do, you know, lots of different things, that all lifestyle stuff, you know, like prioritizing sleep, making sure I get, you know, daylight in the mornings and not looking at screens at night, and wearing my blue blocking glasses. And, you know, I think circadian rhythm is really important, because sleep is a big thing in fibro, that we do struggle with it. Making sure you don't bite off more than you can chew, you know, in terms of pushing yourself too much. You know, it's all about doing things within your capabilities and knowing what you can and can't do, and really sticking to keto, because keto, for me, the actual ketones themselves are therapeutic. It's not just that I'm not eating the carbs. It's actually the ketones are anti-inflammatory. They help to dampen an overactive nervous system, which is basically what fibro is. And also they increase calming neurotransmitters like GABA as well, which can help with mood, with sleep, with pain, all those things. So I always say ketones for me are therapeutic in the same way they are for someone with epilepsy. So that's how I see it. It's very medicinal for me. So if someone offers me a piece of cake, I just say, I'm sorry, you know, that will kick me out of ketosis, and that's like taking my medicine away, you know. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
So that was my question. What version of the ketogenic diet you're doing? So you're doing the version that keeps you in ketosis. So that's your aim. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
Yes. And I know that there are people who talk about cyclical keto and do we need to go in and out? And, you know, for some people that might work. But I feel like when you have a medical condition that is actually relying on the ketones, then, I don't see a problem in doing it long term if it agrees with you. If you're feeling terrible, then clearly that's not right for you. But for me, I feel so much better on keto, like night and day. It's not even comparable. So for me, I don't see any reason not to keep doing it.
So what you're doing is the real high fat, moderate protein, and super low carb. Am I right?
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's definitely what most people assume that you have to do. But you can, once you're fat adapted, once you are healthy, you can actually increase the protein and reduce the fat a little bit. So what happens when you're first going low carb, and if you are unhealthy and you have been eating lots of carbs, then your background glucose levels are going to be higher. And so when that happens, when you eat protein, you'll have a greater insulin response than if you are healthy and have low glucose. So initially, when, like, my clients, for example, if they're diabetic or they've been really unhealthy and they're first starting out, then you don't want to give them too much protein. You want them to have sufficient protein, but not super, super high. You want the fat to be the main thing, and then that will help them to become fat adapted and all of that. But once you go down the track a bit, you can afford to increase your protein a bit more and reduce your carbs, because you won't be increasing your insulin so much that it's going to kick you out of ketosis. So I play around with, sometimes I'll be much higher protein and lower fat, but predominantly, I love both my protein and my fat. I wouldn't say, I think protein is really important and sometimes underrated. So I certainly love my protein, but I don't usually buy, low fat versions of protein. I'm happy to have my fatty steaks or my chicken thighs instead of the chicken breast and all that. So I'm certainly not scared of fat. Love it. But I'm not eating, sticks of butter or, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that if that suits you and you're healthy and that's working for you. But yeah, that's not the sort of, like, I think a lot of people who think of keto think that you have to be literally eating big servings of pure fat, and adding oil to everything. And, and maybe at the beginning, some people do need to do that, especially if they've got maybe epilepsy or something like that. But there's more and more research showing that you can actually not be quite so extreme with the fat, especially after you're fat adapted. So yeah, but yes, I'm very low carb, very low. Yeah.
I'm pleased you said that, because I had a client who came to me and she said, well, she's reached a plateau and she's just not losing any more weight. And of course, I looked at her diet and she was just doing the internet, what Dr. Westman is good at calling it, internet keto. So she was literally like drenching all her foods with like bottles of cream. I thought, of course you're not losing weight.
Yeah.
Weight. So it's interesting you said that. Now, Carla, on your website, you say keto is a lifestyle, it's not a diet. How did you come up with that statement and why?
So I think that what a lot of people do is they use keto as a short-term thing, where they say, I want to lose, a dress size because, I've got a party coming up or something like that. And then they just revert back to their regular eating. So in the long term, if you keep doing that, you're just in the yo-yo dieting cycle, which is really, really unhealthy. And it also means that in the long term, it's actually harder to lose weight. Like, you really stuff up your whole body when you yo-yo diet for too long. So for me, I think, and especially like most of my clients as well have maybe insulin resistance or diabetes or pre-diabetes or something like that. And so it's not just about the weight, it's about the health. So if you're, heading towards diabetes, or you already have diabetes and you do keto for a short time, all your markers will improve. But if you go back, it's not like when you have an illness and you take a medication that eradicates the illness and then you're better. It's not like that. It's not a quick fix. It's got to be a lifestyle change, because if you can actually reverse your diabetes, but it's only really in remission, because if you start eating the way that got you into diabetes in the first place, you'll go right back there. So, if you're doing it for health, then just doing it for a short period of time will only benefit you for a short period of time. So most people want ongoing health. We don't want health for 5 minutes, and it takes a while to reverse all of the damage that's been done. So just doing it for a few weeks, it's not really in the long term very helpful. So it's a mindset. A lot of the work I do with my clients, it's not just about what you eat, it's about how you think about what you eat. And you need to be really looking into the future and eating today for your future self. So, we often do things for our future self. When you brush your teeth every day, you're doing it so that you don't get holes in your teeth in the future. You're not going to get a hole between today and tomorrow if you don't brush your teeth, but you know that you have to do it every day. And it's the same thing. I know that I need to eat a certain way every day to maintain my health and to maintain my, even putting fibromyalgia to the side. If I just started eating the way that I used to eat, I would put all the weight back on. It's just the way it is. So, no one wants a quick fix that doesn't last. So you need to change your mindset so that it's a lifestyle. It's something you do. For me, it's almost part of my identity, and people might not, they might think that sounds a bit strange, but, for example, as a type 1 diabetic, you probably think of yourself as a diabetic. That is, it affects everything you do. It affects your everyday life, and for me, I am ketogenic. That is something that affects every choice I make about my food and, where I'm going to eat and what I'm going to choose and whether I need to take food with me when I go out. And, my health is something that I actively work on every single day of my life. When I get up and go and put my feet on the freezing cold grass this morning to do my grounding, I was cold, but I did it anyway. When I do my meditation, sometimes I'm thinking I'd much rather just sit down and watch Netflix, but I don't. I do my meditation. When I, eat the, eggs for breakfast and, someone next to me is eating something. I mean, I'm not these days, I don't really get distracted by that. But in the past, someone else would be eating something, a muffin that I would have preferred, but I don't. I eat the eggs, it's, and it becomes easier and easier. And it becomes, when it is your lifestyle, you don't have to question it every single day. You don't have to say, am I going to eat keto today? What am I going to do? You just do it because it is just part of your life. But you have to maintain the vigilance to keep the habits going. Because if you kind of, fall off the wagon, so to speak, then it's very easy to snowball, I think. And so I always say, if that happens, draw a line in the sand. Don't say, oh, well, I've stuffed it up now. I've had one muffin. I may as well have 10. Just draw a line in the sand, start again. You haven't done much damage, in one meal. But if you keep going 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, then it changes everything. So yeah, for me, lifestyle, it just is a lifestyle. It just is what I do and who I am.
That's amazing, Carla. When did you start the keto lifestyle? What year was it? Do you remember?
So I started low carb in 2018, and I started keto in beginning of 2020. And I remember that because it was the year that COVID lockdowns began. And so it was actually, even though I'm not, I didn't love the lockdowns, but the benefit, the silver lining for me was that I was at home. So I didn't have any temptations of, going out or friends offering me things or anything like that. And I was in the kitchen able to weigh and measure everything, because even though I'd been keto for a few years at that point, I still wasn't as aware as I thought I was about exactly how much carbohydrate was in things. So I started weighing and measuring everything. And things like nuts, for example, nuts, seeds, some of the more, even the low carb veggies, but ones that have a little bit more carbs, like say, a pasta sauce or, something like that, where it's kind of a bit more concentrated, and I'd look at the carbohydrates and go, oh my goodness, this all adds up, and if you're just wanting to be low carb and be maybe, 50 to 100 grams of carbs a day, you don't really have to think too much about your low carb veggies. You just eat as many as you want. But when you're keto, you have to be very mindful. And that doesn't mean that I can't eat vegetables. There's plenty of super low ones like leafy greens or whatever that you could eat, you know, till the cow comes home. But, you know, things like, you know, capsicum, tomato, avocado, you know, I still eat all those things. But I just have to be mindful, you know, especially nuts and seeds. I think that's a big one. People don't realize that there's carbs in nuts and seeds, and that adds up. So, you know, if you're having, yeah, some with, you know, your breakfast and some with your lunch, you know, some with your dinner, like it does add up. So I just had to be a lot more aware, a lot more mindful in order to stay in ketosis. You know, most people need to be 20 to 30 grams of net carbs a day, which requires some initially some weighing and measuring. I think most people wouldn't be able to guesstimate what that was. So yeah, so that was kind of good for me, you know, that I had that lockdown time to be able to focus on that. And then once, you know, I was able to go out again, I knew exactly what was in everything, and I didn't need to be weighing and measuring all the time. And it was just much more, you know, a habit and a routine, you know, but I hadn't had other people trying to derail me along that period, which was very, very helpful. Not to say that you can't do it, you know, not being in lockdown, but it just so happened that was good timing for me.
I always say, ask a type 1 diabetic. They'll be able to tell you exactly how much insulin they have to take
Yes.
for those
Yes.
cashew nuts and the peanuts and the almond flour, whatever. So
Yep.
yeah, everything needs insulin. So all of it, and it does add up, especially
Yep.
those concentrated sauces. So and it's not just tomatoes. Most, of course, like pasta sauces, right? Most of them will have carrots in there too, and you know,
Onions.
it all adds up. And onions, it all adds up, and it's all concentrated. So
Yep.
yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. Carla, did you get any sort of help? Not that you would have needed the help, but support is important, right? Family support, and if it's not actual sort of physical support, at least, you know, moral support from your own family members, or were they all
For
dismissed what you were
for
doing?
the for the keto diet,
For
do you
your
mean?
choice, dietary choice, yeah, keto.
Um, so look, I think everybody was supportive in the sense that they accepted that was what I was doing. And you know, like if I went to my parents' house or whatever, you know, they'd try and, you know, accommodate and have things that I could eat and stuff like that. But at home, it was really nobody else wanted to do it with me. So it was very much my thing. So when I was cooking a meal, I would just cook the same thing for everybody, but I would make a substitute. So for example, if they were having, you know, rice, I might have konjac rice or cauliflower rice. You know, or I would, if it was just meat and veggies, you know, add some potatoes for them. Or, you know, if we're having burgers, I'd have it bunless and they'd have bread, you know. So I guess I just made it workable by just making those kind of tweaks. Since I've started, my husband on and off has sort of attempted low carb / keto various times. And I think he does feel better for it, but he does find it really hard to stick to. So, but these days, more often than not, he's happy if I make a keto meal, he'll just eat it as well. Although, you know, he still does sometimes get, you know, oh no, I wouldn't mind some of those potatoes, or, you know, like, it just depends what mood he's in, or what, you know, point he's in, whether he's trying to, you know, do it seriously or not. So yeah, it does make it easier, certainly if you have somebody doing it with you. But I'm so determined to keep myself healthy that for me, I'm not derailed by other people. Yeah, I'm just focused, and I just do it for me. And I try my best to not bring too many things into the house that, you know, would be non-keto. Or, you know, I mean, obviously there are some things for, you know, especially for the kids. But I do try as much as I can to have a pretty healthy household in terms of food. You know, like if the kids want to eat crap out, well, that's not necessarily something I can really control once they get to a certain age. But at home, you know, I always try and provide healthy meals. And, you know, I don't think that kids need to be low carb, but I try and make it whole food as much as possible. You know, the sorts of carbs I'm going to give them are more likely to be, you know, potatoes, or, you know, basmati rice, or, you know, something like that, rather than, you know, pasta or, yeah, things that are perhaps more refined. I mean, we do have bread in the house, but again, I'll try and get organic sourdough, as much as I can. I'm trying to sort of be healthy. And, like if I'm making eggs on toast, it'll be more eggs, less toast, like I'm always trying to err on the side of increasing the protein and healthy fats as much as I can. And so, yeah, you do what you can with teenagers. You don't have full control.
How old are they, your kids?
16 and 19.
Yeah, that's so mine turned 19, and she did the carbs and not junk food. I mean, I didn't have junk food at home, but she did the carbs. She'd ask for the carbs, the pasta and the potatoes until she turned 19, and she said, I'm doing keto. And I looked at her, so I said, really? How? I mean, you're just about to start college. Like, how's that gonna work? She said, do you need help? She said, no, I know everything. I know what to do. And she's still doing keto. Well, keto,
Oh,
carnivore.
wow.
Yeah. Even though she's at college, she just cooks herself chicken and sometimes minced meat, and it's
Great.
easy. It's not actually difficult, but she decided it was her decision. I couldn't
Yeah,
really.
it has to be. It has to be with anyone. You can lead a
Yeah,
horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. And I just have to hope that I have laid the groundwork, and that at some point realization will hit. you know, and not necessarily that they need to be keto, but
it's
the main thing is about eating real whole foods. That's my main thing with anybody, no matter what the situation is. That's the underlying thing that, yeah, it underpins nutrition, is eat real whole foods and alter the carbohydrate amount depending on your metabolic health, your goals, what you want to achieve and how it affects you. That's kind of the summary, I guess, of healthy eating.
I love that. I love that. In fact, that just reminds me of all of your posts on the ones I see mostly are the ones on Instagram, but I know you post the same ones on Facebook as well. It takes time to sit down and type up beautiful posts. So what motivates you, Carla? I love them, by the way. I really appreciate them. So you don't go into so many details that it would bore someone, but you do provide beautiful explanations. And I appreciate those posts because, what you're doing is what I'm trying to do as well. We're just educating people that there
Yes.
is a different way of eating. There is a better way, in fact, especially if you are diabetic or insulin resistant. And a lot of people aren't hearing this message from their healthcare providers. So people like you, your account, my account, and many others like us are trying just to
Yeah.
educate and inform people that it's perfectly safe to eat this way. It's
Yes.
okay not to have 6 meals a day. And,
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you so much for that lovely endorsement of my Instagram, because I do love sharing on Instagram. And I think that, like you said, there are lots of people out there like us, and it's all coming from a grassroots level. And I truly believe that this change, it has to come from the ground up, because there are too many people at the top, big businesses, people in government who, that they're just not thinking about the individual health of people. There's too much money and corruption involved. And, I hate saying that because it sounds like you're a conspiracy theorist, but it's actually true, and it's documented left, right, and center, if you know where to look. So I really feel like we have to, as the people who are in the know, who do have that knowledge, it's our responsibility to share it and to help make that change. And the more individuals that we, help, and the more people that listen to your podcast or see one of my posts, or, see me or you as a client, or whatever it is, these people, they learn that it's good for them. They then are healthier. They then show that to the people around them who might question it and might start doing it. And it just spreads. And, it's the only way. We have to do it from the ground up. And I'm just so passionate about sharing this information, because I feel it's really unfair. Like, I spent the majority of my life struggling with weight and health, trying to do the right thing. I did everything they told me to do. I cut that fat, I cut those calories, I exercised, so much, and it just didn't work. And there's so many millions of people out there who are doing everything they're being told to do, and then they go back to the doctor and the doctor says, well, you mustn't be doing it right. You mustn't be cutting your calories enough. You mustn't be exercising enough. It's your fault. And that's just not true. In the majority of cases, especially with overweight people, like, how many people do you know who tell someone who's overweight, did you know that that's not healthy and you should lose weight? Well, come on. Every single person who's overweight knows that. And I would say the vast majority, 99.9% of them, would lose weight if they could. And so it's not about that. It's about giving them the right tools and the right information. And I just feel very, very strongly that until that message is given to people, then we are taking away people's freedom to be healthy, because they don't have the power to change if they don't know how to change. If they think they're doing the right thing, but they just don't have the knowledge, that's something we can give them. We can help them on their journey towards health by giving them that knowledge. So if that's something I've got that I then don't pass on, that just feels wrong. I just feel like I want to help people, and I want to make it as understandable as possible. So when I do my posts, I try really hard to make it understandable for the average person who doesn't have any qualifications. And there are some amazing people out there who post all sorts of intricate stuff and sciencey stuff. And that's great for people who want to learn about that and who can understand that. And, I enjoy getting into a bit more of the nitty-gritty science stuff. But the average person is going to turn off. That's not going to help them. I need to take a study, summarize it, tell them what the finding is. They don't want to read that study themselves. That's my job. That's what I feel is my job on Instagram, is to take a concept, make it simple, pass it on. And then if someone wants to delve deeper, I'm more than happy to help them and give them links or whatever it is, but they at least can get that little bite-sized piece of information, take it away, think about it, do something with it, hopefully change their life with it, even if it's just a small step. So that's kind of my goal, I guess.
I really appreciate what you do. For all the vices that associated with social media, I have learned so much. I don't get involved in conflicts or personal attacks at all, and I don't even enjoy threads or whatever, like that of that sort. But I've learned so much from following the right people.
Yes.
On social media. And when I have time, I'm sitting down and having a cup of coffee. I go and look for some accounts, and I look for people genuine, so people asking genuine questions, not making a mockery of someone's post, but just genuine questions. And quite often I choose, oh, that's a nice one. That's a genuine profile, not a scammer. So it's just asking a question about diet, and I want to reply. And then I see that you've been there before me, and I go, let me reply to that one. Let me see if there is another one. So I literally do that. Like today, someone was asking, are starches sugars? Like I thought, okay, I'll just give a simple paragraph to explain what starches are. So, but quite often you're there before me, but you're
we follow the same people.
I think you're 12 hours ahead of me anyway. So
that's why.
we follow the same people. Yeah, we follow the same people. So okay.
I do think, sorry, you're right though, that there are some people out there that aren't genuine. And I think it's really important not to engage with them, because I don't want to waste my time. If someone's decided that I'm a charlatan and they know everything and, whatever, there is no point. Nothing I say is going to change their mind. I could spend my energy on helping someone who has a genuine question, who really wants to learn. So you have to work out who are the people that are worth responding to, who are actually going to appreciate, your comment, and who are the people that just want to fight. I don't want to fight. That's not why I'm there. I don't have enough time to waste my energy on fighting. If you genuinely want me to help, if you genuinely want me to share some resources and you want to learn and open your horizons, absolutely, I'm there for you. Ask me a question. but I'm not going to have a big, slanging match, like it's just not worth it.
Yeah, you said the word charlatan. I think it's the latest trend, right? I'm seeing it everywhere. Everyone's post, "You're a charlatan, you're a charlatan." Oh my God. Not directed to me, but
yeah,
some of the world's leading scientists, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And people just call them charlatan. I go, oh gosh, okay. It's crazy. It must be the latest trend.
Yeah. Or they just write wrong. Have you seen that? People, like, you say something and they just reply wrong. And it's like, if you're not even willing to write a full sentence that tells me why you think I'm wrong, I'm just going to respond to that. Crazy.
Yeah, I don't engage either. I don't. I think, hey, psychology. You understand psychology, right? So, in fact, psychology and nutrition are two of my absolute favorite subjects. So that's why I get along so well with you. See? So
yeah, they go
but
well.
yeah,
They
but
go
you
well.
don't
Like
feed
bacon and
people
eggs.
yeah, true. So yeah, I think most of those people are probably looking for a reaction with a negative comment like that, and you just don't give them the reaction they're seeking.
Yeah. And some of them too, it's so much easier to insult somebody behind the protection of a screen. A lot of these people are probably actually cowards, but they act like bullies because you don't know who they are, where they are, you can't confront them, so they think they can just say whatever they want, and some people just get a lot of joy out of that, just trolling, and just, they actually go to sites that they know they disagree so that they can go through the comments and cause trouble. I don't get it, but anyway.
Yeah, no, I don't get it either. Carla, let's talk about your sort of okay. So what is there anything common between, I'm sure you have clients, with diverse symptoms and problems and issues. You're a nutritionist, so they may come to you for various different reasons. Do you think there is an underlying root cause? And if so, then what would that be? That joins all of your clients or puts them all in the same boat, sort of.
So look, I would say the majority of people I work with have insulin resistance.
There you go. Yeah.
And insulin resistance is, it's a spectrum. You can start off with insulin resistance that has no signs or symptoms at all, and then it progresses to pre-diabetes, and then it progresses to diabetes. And the problem, as I'm sure you're aware, with the modern medical way of treating diabetes and looking in terms of prevention, they're only looking at glucose. They're not looking at insulin. So it can take like 10 plus years of that insulin resistant process before you actually get to a point that your glucose levels rise. And the reason is that your body is very clever and it knows that high glucose levels are dangerous. And so it tries really, really hard to reduce those glucose levels by producing more and more insulin. So basically, over time, you've got a situation where the body is desperately trying to put out the flames of too much glucose by adding the insulin, but then the body eventually becomes resistant to the insulin because there's so much. The cells are saying, there's no more room in here. We cannot accept any more glucose. Go away, insulin. So it resists that action of the insulin. And so the body gets even more stressed. Oh my God, we better produce even more insulin. And it's this really vicious cycle. And it's only when the body gets to the point that it literally cannot accept any more glucose into the cells, the insulin is sky high, and then the glucose in the blood starts going up. And it's only at this point that you go to the doctor and they go, oh, look at that, you've got pre-diabetes. Or if it's, even you've left it even longer, oh, look, you've got diabetes. But if you'd gone 2 or 3 years earlier, despite the fact that if they tested insulin, they would have discovered that it was sky high and you were insulin resistant, you go to the doctor and they look at your HbA1c, which is a 3-month average of your glucose, or they do a fasting glucose, whatever it is. They're just looking at glucose. And so they go, no, your glucose is fine. Yeah, it's fine because your body is doing an incredible job of making it fine, but it's suffering in the meantime, And so there really needs to be a focus on insulin. And I really hope in years to come that doctors will learn to test insulin and not just glucose, because we would have so much more power to prevent the onset of diabetes. Because once you get diabetes, it's much harder to reverse it than if you never got there in the first place, obviously. So yeah, I think definitely insulin resistance is the underlying thing that links most people that I would talk to, for sure.
I agree with the fasting insulin test. So I tell my clients when they go for their annual checks, just to tell their GP to just add that to the list as well.
Yep.
And the GP
Yep.
is just surprised. Where did you hear about that? I've never had to do that. Just, I told my client the other day, just tell him to write it, just to add it. And it's really inexpensive, I hear. So we're just not focusing on the right factor. We're not focusing on the insulin. We're focusing on the blood sugar.
And then, of course, you have that when the doctor gets the insulin result back, assuming, of course, that they are open-minded enough to do it, they don't know how to interpret the results, and B, depending on which lab you go to, the ranges of what's acceptable is so different. And not only is it so different, but of course, the ranges go much, much higher than what is actually healthy. So even if you get your doctor to do it, you still then have to know how to interpret it as well, and not go, oh, I've got an insulin of 20. My doctor says that's fine. So there's layers upon layers. It's not just getting the test, it's talking to someone who actually knows how to interpret the test as well, which most doctors don't, because they don't normally order it. So why would they know how to interpret it?
Now that you and I are venting, so let me bring in the CGMs as well. So
yes, I love them.
So the CGMs, again, my clients aren't being prescribed CGMs because their doctors are telling them you're not diabetic yet. You're pre-diabetic, but not diabetic. And until you are diabetic, we do not give you a CGM. Where is the logic in that?
It's insane. It's insane. It's a bit like saying, just wait till you're dead and then we'll give you some medical treatment. It's too late. It's not too late. You can reverse it, but it's too late to prevent it if you wait until you get there. And the studies show that if you wear a CGM, you will reduce your glucose levels, because it just makes sense. You are seeing minute by minute the effects of the food on your glucose. And I know my husband, when he wears one, his whole diet changes because he doesn't want that line to go up. And he knows, and he's like, okay, if I eat this, I know that's going to happen, so I'm going to eat this instead. And then he gets really happy that he sees his lines, really flat. And, and then if he's not wearing one, he'll go to eat something and I'll say, even though you're not wearing the CGM, you do know that that's still going to have the same effect that it had when you were wearing the CGM. He's like, I know, but I can't see it. So it's not as motivating, like just having that graph is so motivating to make changes. And so, ideally, you don't need to wear them forever. You just wear them for enough time to learn how your body reacts to different foods, and when you eat and how much you eat and what you eat it with, and, whatever, all the different factors, because there's so many different factors. And you work out what works for you, and then you just keep doing it. You don't need to wear a CGM forever, but you do need to get that information and not just rely on the CGM that you see somebody on Instagram using, because their metabolic health is probably completely different to yours, and you're an individual and you respond differently. And, often I'll see in those posts where people show the CGM and they say, well, your glucose might have done that, but I'm a, whatever it is, type 1 diabetic, or, type 2 diabetic, or, whatever the situation is, my insulin, a glucose would go absolutely bonkers, yet there's someone who doesn't have diabetes is on there showing their graph, and everybody thinks with diabetes that it's going to be the same. It's not going to be the same depending on your, whether you've got diabetes, but also just person to person. Some people are just super sensitive to particular things, even sweeteners. Some people, it's rare, but there are people who can have a calorie-free sweetener that shouldn't theoretically do anything to their glucose, but it does. So, you just have to check on yourself to know exactly what works for you. So CGMs are absolutely brilliant because they're minute by minute. If you do the finger prick, you could miss the highs or the lows, or, you know, the nuance of it all. You know, you really need to see that full accurate graph to really know what's happening.
Do you know if they're available, readily available in Melbourne? I mean, can you walk into a pharmacy and buy
You
one?
can. You can. It's quite recent, but I have bought them from a pharmacy. And there is, if you do have diabetes, there is a program that I think you can get them cheaper. But if you aren't diabetic, the thing is, though, it's ironic. I can walk into a pharmacy and ask for one and buy it, and they give it to me, no problem. But if you ring the company and ask for advice, they will tell you that they are not designed for non-diabetics, and they won't talk to you. So that they're covering themselves, I think, because my guess is that, you know, you probably have to pay a certain amount to say that it's, you know, for use in a particular group, maybe, and they're only like allowed to say that it works for people with diabetes. I don't know the nitty gritty of it, but there must be some, because if they would just want to make money, so if they could sell it to everybody, they would increase their market. So why wouldn't they? There's got to be a monetary reason or a regulatory reason, I would imagine.
Which company are you talking about? The Abbott
I
Libre?
use Freestyle Libra. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's interesting because in the UK, they don't, you just create an account with them and just order from the company through the app,
No.
on the phone. They don't ask if you're diabetic or not. They're
No,
not
if
interested.
you order it online, you have to tick a box that says I'm diabetic. Yeah.
Maybe I have ticked
Otherwise,
that box. I don't remember.
yeah.
Since 2017. I've been wearing them regularly since 2017. Carla, is there anything else that you'd like to share with my audience today? They will love our chat. I think we talked about everything. So is there anything you would like to share? There's one thing I'm thinking of, and I think you've posted on that before as well, about people's fear of cholesterol, because, hey, on a ketogenic diet, your total cholesterol might go up. And I remember seeing a post on that a long time ago from you. Is that something you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, so I think that there is a lot of misconceptions, I guess, about cholesterol. And, you know, you do have to be really careful what you say because, you know, I'm not a doctor and I'm not giving medical advice. But at the same time, I want people to be aware that the information that they're getting may be outdated. It may be coming from studies that perhaps, you know, when they've been re-examined, they actually find different conclusions because the people who wrote the studies actually had a conflict of interest that they didn't let anyone know about. So, and, you know, Ansel Keys has a lot to answer for. You know, when he did his so-called 7-country studies, and there were actually 22 countries, and he cherry-picked and then told the world that, you know, fat was bad based on this totally flawed study. So, you know, there's a lot of nuance. And I think that cholesterol isn't very well understood, even by doctors, because, you know, and I don't mean to criticize doctors, but they learn what they were taught. But, you know, there's information now, for example, about LDL cholesterol, that there's more than one type. So there's the small dense type and the large fluffy type. And the small dense type is the type that is associated with heart disease, and the large fluffy buoyant type is not. So if you're on a ketogenic diet, it is quite common that for some people, and not everyone, some people's cholesterol goes down, but for many people, the total cholesterol will go up and the LDL might go up as well. But what sort of LDL is it is what I want to know. So I'm often telling my patients, you know, my clients, ask your doctor for a subfraction lipid particle test, which will differentiate between the two types of LDL. Because if your total LDL has gone up, but there's no small dense types, you know, and also if you do a calcium score as well, and if that's 0, then really you quite possibly don't have anything to worry about, especially if your HDL is high enough, because we want good HDL, and your triglycerides are low enough. So it's not just about LDL. You have to look at the whole picture. And of course, I'm not giving anyone medical advice. I am just saying that when you're talking to your doctor, do some research into these things yourself and ask them to do that extra test so that you've got more information. Because at the moment, if you go in and you're getting your doctor to give you information or advice about, for example, maybe going on a statin, based on incomplete information, then I don't think that's doing you as an individual any favors. You want all the information and you want to look at all the risk factors. And there are, there was a relatively recent study that showed all the risk factors for heart disease, and LDL was really quite low. And things like having low triglycerides and high enough HDL were much higher up. So, there's just this focus in the nutrition world. Be low fat, don't eat cholesterol, avoid eggs, avoid meat, keep your LDL as low as you can, but then you look at those tests, those studies that people with the lowest LDL actually died earlier. I'm sorry. Yeah. So having enough LDL, was actually made you live longer. So yeah, there's just so many studies out there that contradict each other. And of course, it's a really hard thing for someone to navigate, but it's just good to know what questions to ask your doctor, to know what tests to ask them, to do more information. If a doctor is prescribing you a medication, you should feel comfortable about taking that based on not just what the doctor tells you, but, having a look at the research yourself, and I'm not saying you have to go and get a medical degree, but just know what questions to ask, and maybe try and find a doctor who is a bit more holistic, who, if you are doing low carb or keto, if you see a doctor who specializes in low carb or keto, they will know all this information that I'm talking about, and they will be able to guide you so that you're still being guided by a medical professional. You're not just going ad hoc and saying, I'm going to just do my own research and, as a layperson, make my medical decision, because I'm not suggesting that. But if you talk to someone who actually has that knowledge, then I think that's really a good way to have an open and honest discussion where you as an individual are taken into account, and you're not just given a slap bang approach of just, this is just what we do. These are the guidelines. It's like, okay, well, the guidelines might be outdated. How about we look at the current research? And, most low carb doctors are up on the latest research because, like you and I, they've gone outside that just follow the guidelines model, and they've done more research. So that's what I'd suggest. And there's so many more low carb friendly doctors out there now. They're not hard to find. So really, that would be my biggest piece of advice, that if you've got medical issues and you're doing low carb, go to a specialist, because they're going to be able to help you with the lifestyle you've chosen, rather than telling you, oh, all your figures look great, but I don't want you eating that much meat, for example. Like, I can't tell you how many people say that. Like, the doctor says all your labs are perfect, but you're going to kill yourself. Stop eating like that. And it's like, well, hang on a second. You just told me my labs are perfect. I'm feeling great. Like, there's a disconnect. You've got to find a doctor that doesn't think like that, in my opinion.
I just remembered my GP in my last annual in the UK. So my annual checkup at my GP's, he did the urine stick test, which is part of the routine test. And he said, oh, I can see some ketones in here. And I said, great, I'm in ketosis. Yeah. And he was like so shocked. And he couldn't, I realized he had no understanding of what I was talking about. And he said it was dangerous and I shouldn't be doing a keto diet. I said, I know what I'm doing. And, but I don't know whether to laugh or, cry about it. In today's age, and he was a relatively young doctor, definitely 20 years younger than I am, probably in his just fresh graduate. How can you not have heard of the ketogenic diet? And of course, if you looked at my records, you're type 1 diabetic. He was even more freaked out. So.
Oh, of course.
And he was just trace ketones, actually. Trace ketones, and it was disappointing for me. But of course, you have to be careful. But if you want, you see, I think everyone needs to understand the difference between diabetic ketoacidosis and nutritional ketosis. And that should be in biology 101,
It should. It absolutely should. Yeah, no, I was just saying the being careful thing about, I think there's a lot of people like type ones who hear about, doing the keto diet, and they might just jump straight in. And, I'm sure you would agree, you need some medical supervision at the start to, so that you're not having major hypos and things like that. So, and knowing how to manage your insulin and all that stuff. So, you do have to be careful. But yeah, the doctor clearly didn't know anything about.
I have a group, by the way. I'm going to mention the plug in my group here. For type ones who do keto and who also do fasting. So my group link will be below, and all of Carla's links will be below, including her website. So you're welcome to contact Carla if you need her help. Carla, I can't thank you enough for this wonderful chat, and we should do it again.
Oh, absolutely. I've had such a great time.
There's so much more we can talk about, so we definitely should repeat this.
We're on the same page.
Exactly the same page. Thank you so much, Carla, and you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, and you have a good sleep.
Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.